Final Fantasy VII, the original 1997 Squaresoft role-playing game, is undoubtedly one of the greatest games of all time. At over 10 million units sold, it's the second best-selling PlayStation game ever, outranking other heavy hitters of the era such as Tomb Raider, Crash Bandicoot, Tekken, Resident Evil, and Metal Gear. Only the original Gran Turismo sold more copies on the PS1. But let's be honest, I think we all know which game had the better vehicular action. While there have been plenty of successful role-playing games before it, Final Fantasy VII was the RPG that truly popularized the genre outside of Japan. Instead of platformers or fighters or racing games, here was a 40-hour adventure with a riveting story, complex characters, lush locations, a sweeping soundtrack, and state-of-the-art graphics and cutscenes. You know, state-of-the-art for 1997. It might not look like much now, but then again, now we've got refrigerators that can play Skyrim. So after the mega success of Final Fantasy VII in the late 90s, it's no wonder fans were clamoring for a modern remake of the game. Imagine seeing all your favorite moments remade on modern hardware. Those deep, moving, epic moments. Like this. And this. And who could forget this? Luckily for fans of Tifa's orthopedic underwear, over 2 decades later after its original release, Final Fantasy VII was completely remade from the ground up. In April 2020, Square-Enix released Final Fantasy VII Remake. Sure, the title's a little clunky, but I guess this is the same video game company that brought us Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue. But who cares what it's called? All that matters is that Final Fantasy VII, one of the greatest games of the 1990s, has been faithfully remade for the modern gaming era.
Naughty, naughty! Until one of our flames is forever extinguished, our games will never end!
Oh goodness! I'm experiencing an emotional response.
Oh.
Whispers. Perhaps best described as arbiters of fate.
Huh. Okay. Well, some changes were to be expected. I mean, of course they'd add to the game. That's cool, just as long as the major story beats are the same. No, that's not what happens. Wait a minute. Is this footage from Kingdom Hearts? Are they on the moon right now? Alright, Final Fantasy VII Remake is an impressive graphical overhaul of the PS1 original. It's got a decent attempt at a modern battle system. The voice acting is great, the music sounds good, and Square-Enix did a fine job fleshing out supporting characters and side plots. But enough with the niceties. Let's be honest here. Final Fantasy VII Remake takes a big steaming dump on the story. Like, I had dinner at the Old Country Buffet and then immediately went home and chugged an entire bottle of Mad Dog 2020 style dump. Oh, and the Mad Dog flavor was red grape. Whew. That's how bad the remake messed up FF7's story. And I don't need to tell you that the story is literally the most important part of any role-playing game. Because, you know, you're playing a role in a story. So what exactly went wrong? Where did the remake go off the rails? Is there a way we can pinpoint who's to blame for the god-awful story changes? Well, before I dive into what I felt were Final Fantasy VII Remake's major failings, I just want to quickly point out some things that I thought the game succeeded at, just to prove I'm not some internet contrarian who spends all his time complaining about how The Rise of Skywalker is the worst Star Wars movie ever made. First off, it should go without saying that the graphics are amazing. Square-Enix, and Squaresoft before it, has proven time and time again that they have what it takes to make a visually stunning product. It's just too bad that modern Square has proved time and time again that they can't write a decent script to save their lives. Exploring the city of Midgar is a visual feast. It feels like a living, breathing, lived-in city, from the grimy slums to the corporate world of the upper plate. And it's huge. Seriously, I continuously got turned around in the Sector 7 slums. There's a lot to explore. Tons of nooks and crannies filled with dilapidated buildings and colorful characters. I love that the game didn't always feel like I was just going from point A to point B, like some other games that make you feel like you're just walking straight down a hallway for 30 hours. And the characters look gorgeous too. Well, most of them.
Tifa, you won't believe this!
You up for some exercise?
I know every character can't look as good as Cloud and the crew, but some of these guys look like they belong in a PS2 game.
Boss, it was just that once. The roof was rigged with C4.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, maybe they don't look that bad. Oh God, what is that sound she's making? It's like they're punching an inflatable clown. Note to self, play Charlie's Angels PS2 game, possibly after chugging a bottle of Mad Dog 2020. Another thing I loved about the Final Fantasy VII Remake was seeing how classic scenes from the original game were updated for the PS4. Scenes like the church encounter with Aerith and Reno, and all of the stuff at Aerith's home with Elmira is fun to watch play out on a modern game engine. The whole Honeybee Inn sequence was also a lot of fun, particularly Cloud's cross-dressing scene now involving a rhythm minigame dance-off. Emotional moments such as Barrett's anguish after the plate collapse were well done in terms of both design and voice acting.
God damn you! God damn you all!
Speaking of voice acting, there were a lot of nice small moments of levity and jokiness that fell in place with the original game's sometimes goofy tone.
You worry too much. I'm not some princess who needs to be coddled. Shit.
What is this ragtag group of misfits I see before me? Avalanche!
Local florist!
Lab rat dog.
Hell, you might even try smiling. On second thought,
I like the fact that the remake didn't get cold feet with some of the original game's goofier enemies, but actually put them front and center, sometimes to hilariously awesome results. And battles themselves got a major overhaul, with the classic Final Fantasy active time battle system getting swapped out for an action-y ATB hybrid system that's not quite as button-mashy as Kingdom Hearts, but still feels more natural than the combat from Final Fantasy XV. Everyone in the main party has their own unique style of battle. Barrett is useful for hitting enemies that are out of range of Cloud's sword, and Tifa likes to get up close and personal with some fisting action. Are we still doing phrasing? You can toggle between characters on a whim while in battle, plus you can issue commands to the characters you're currently not controlling. The only character you can't control is Red 13. Square-Enix opted not to let the player control Red since he joins up with Cloud in the company fairly late in the remake, stating it didn't make much sense to throw a whole new style of character combat at the player in the last 10% of the game. That logic checks out, but I honestly think the developers just got lazy in the 11th hour, especially since it was discovered you can take control of Red via a save editor. Materia, those magical orbs from the original, still exist in the remake, and can still be used in tandem with one another to create unique combinations when equipped on your weapons and armor. Speaking of weapons, they now utilize a skill tree system that's very reminiscent of Final Fantasy XIII's Crystal Aquarium? Characters can equip as much materia as slots they have available, and the number of slots can typically be increased as you upgrade the weapon. However, characters can only equip one summon materia at a time. Those summons look better, and in some cases fatter, than ever. However, the remake adopted Final Fantasy XV's stance by not really letting you summon them whenever you want, instead giving you the option to call them during certain battles or when a particular battle is going on for far too long. Not a huge deal, but what's more satisfying than calling a ridiculously overpowered summon to squash a pathetic enemy? It's like playing Little League with a roided up pro on your team.
Oh, pick me! Come on, pick me over here!
Pick me! Pick me!
I picked Ken Griffey Jr. Aw, jeez.
There's a lot to like about the remake. In fact, a lot of people think the Final Fantasy VII Remake is a great game. Some people even thought it was better than the original game. I'm not here to judge. I certainly don't want to put other people down for their own opinions. But then again, some people like The Rise of Skywalker, a movie that literally brought Emperor Palpatine back from the dead in the opening text instead of in a dramatic reveal. Like, I don't know, as a cliffhanger in the previous movie? Again, I'm not saying some people are idiots, but before I get to the story changes that effectively Cleveland steamered the whole remake, I would like to point out some of the other gripes I had with the game as I was playing. For those who don't know, Final Fantasy VII Remake is actually only one portion of the original 1997 game. In the original PlayStation game, the player starts out as Cloud Strife, a mercenary who gets hired for a few eco-terrorist gigs in the massive city of Midgar. Eventually, Cloud and his friends leave Midgar and explore the rest of the world, but that first section of the game inside the city takes about 3 to 4 hours to complete. The 2020 remake is only the Midgar section of the game. The rest of the remake is going to be divided up into an unknown number of parts, released in an unknown time frame. On one hand, there was a lot of opportunity to expand the city of Midgar and its inhabitants, particularly side characters like members of Barrett's eco-terrorist group, Avalanche. Just like in the original game, you work alongside Avalanche members Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse to help blow up a series of reactors in Midgar. In the remake, though, these three characters are extremely fleshed out. You even go on a new little side mission with them to go eat pizza at Jesse's house or something. And it's not just bit characters from the old game getting more screen time. Now the city of Midgar is so big, it has new characters to help breathe life into it.
My name is Chadley. I'm an intern for Shinra's Research and Development Division.
His name is Chadley? What's with that dorky monocle thing he's wearing? Is that like Google Glass? Is that still a thing? Well, whatever. So they added one dumb character. That's not too bad. What the fuck? Seriously, this is one of the first problems I had with this game. They introduced this new boss named Roche, who happens to be a member of Soldier. Soldier, by the way, is Shinra's super elite force of fighters. At the beginning of the game, we learn that Cloud is an ex-soldier, and that the legendary Sephiroth was a soldier as well. Initially you think, wow, Soldier sounds like an elite group of badasses. And then there's this guy. Yep. Just look at him go, doing bullshit motorcycle flips with that rad mullet. Roche is the worst character in the entire game, and this is a game with Don Corneo, who is pretty much a legit rapist. Roche is supposed to be an ultra-cool Shinra soldier. Instead, he just comes off as a lame-ass Kingdom Hearts Organization 13 reject. And those guys were already lame to begin with. Seriously, up until this point in the remake, the characters felt relatively grounded. Sure, the Shinra execs are a bit cartoony, but everyone else seems pretty normal. But then the remake had to go and drop in an over-the-top anime character doing stupid flips and other unrealistic anime bullshit. And I think we're supposed to like him? Oh no. Okay, so a few of the new characters are duds, but that's alright. There's plenty of new characters that are fine, or even great, like Sam Elliott, a chocobo rancher in the middle of the city for some reason. And Madam M, hand masseuse? Is that a real thing? But for all the remake's new characters and scaled up areas, like the maze of slums and the vibrant wall market area, much of the game is expanded in a way that feels thin, stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread. Which brings me to one of my major gripes with Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a 4-hour section of the original game stretched out into a 35-hour slog. A lot of people might be happy that they're getting their money's worth, but is it really a 35-hour game when you're constantly getting slowed down to do this? And this? And this. The number of times the game deliberately slows you down to shimmy through something, or forces you to walk through a section, or has you backtrack because the way forward is conveniently blocked, is absolutely infuriating because it happens almost every single chapter.
There's no control panel. We don't have the means to go this way.
We found an elevator on our side, but we can't use it for some reason.
Oh, great. Someone's pulled up the ladder.
Gonna need to find another way through.
This path is blocked too?
The game constantly grinds to a halt for cave-ins or bridge collapses, or in one particularly tedious point in the story, a mini-game where Cloud and Aerith must use a crane to move some scrap to find a way through. And what a mini-game it is. Look, I knew the first part of this remake was only going to encompass the first 4 hours of the original game. And I knew we'd be seeing a fleshed out, updated version of Midgar that would be a whole game in itself. But that doesn't mean Square-Enix needed to drag the whole thing out to a full 35 hours. Sure, a lot of people might like that they're getting bang for their buck, but a lot of Final Fantasy VII Remake feels forced as a result. Take, for example, the second bombing mission. In the original game, you get on a train, your fake IDs get you in trouble, you bail off the train, walk through some tunnels, sneak into the number 5 reactor, set the bomb, get confronted by President Shinra, and then fight Airbuster. The whole sequence takes about 30 minutes. In the remake, you get on a train, spend an hour trudging through the train tunnels, spend another hour in this catwalk level where you find out the way forward is conveniently blocked unless you generate enough power to move a cargo elevator. But you can't do that until you power down all these giant lights. And in order to do that, you have to do a bunch of these elevator puzzles. Then you finally get into the reactor and set the bomb. Great, the bomb's about to go off. We have to rush out of here before the reactor explodes and go fight the Airbuster boss. But wait, all the momentum of this terrorist mission is completely deflated because now we have to spend another 40 minutes dicking around with some computer consoles and looking for key cards so that we can disable some of Airbuster's systems before we even fight him. So any sense of urgency of the bomb we just set is completely out the window because it takes nearly an hour to escape after setting the bomb. It took 3 hours to get through the same chunk of story that only took 30 minutes in the original game. Again, I'm all for expanding the game. You're scaling up a 20-year-old game and you're doling it out in parts. Of course there's got to be more meat on the bone, but a good 50% of this game just feels like padding. It seems like Square-Enix was nervous about releasing a shorter game and then charging full price for it. The result is a lot of unnecessary backtracking, constant, oh, this way is blocked, we'll have to figure out another way through, and a ton of mandatory slowed down walking and shimmying. Without all this, they could have pared the remake from 35 hours down to 25 hours, and that would have still been a tight game worth $60. Instead, what we got was a game that felt flabby, that sometimes felt like a chore to play through. Honestly, a lot of what kept me playing was not necessarily the quality of gameplay or that I was having fun, but the desire to see how some of my favorite scenes of the 1997 game were updated in 2020. Which brings me to the story changes.
I just wanted to...
Cloud! No!
The earliest red flag in Final Fantasy VII Remake is the appearance of these Kingdom Hearts looking dudes. They're called Whispers of Fate. They're these shrouded wraith things that pop up at random points in the game just to annoy you, forcing you to hack at them endlessly until the game decides it's ready to move on.
Whispers. Perhaps best described as arbiters of fate. They are drawn to those who attempt to alter destiny's course and ensure they do not.
So these Whispers of Fate are supposed to be guarding the flow of destiny, ensuring everything is happening the way it's supposed to. If this all sounds like some Star Trek 09 alternate timeline bullcrap, that's because that's exactly what it is. Tetsuya Nomura, who wasn't content running his own creation into the ground, decided to take Final Fantasy VII's story and lay a goofy-sized dump on it.
Gosh, not again!
Sure, you can expand on the original Final Fantasy VII, add new characters and side quests and whatever else you want to give new depth to an old game. But look at this. What have they done? What have they done to my baby? So anyway, all these encounters with the Whispers culminate in this atrocious scene. In the original game, you get captured and imprisoned in Shinra HQ, but then your cell is mysteriously unlocked, and you find a trail of blood leading to the upper levels of the Shinra building. You find out Sephiroth, Shinra's famous soldier who hasn't been seen in 5 or 7 years, broke into Shinra to steal Genova. You follow this trail of blood all the way to President Shinra's office, where you find the president's corpse with Sephiroth's famous sword Masamune sticking out of his back. I cannot emphasize enough how great this sequence was in the original game. Up until this point, you've just been eco-terrorists trying to stop Shinra from bleeding the world dry. Now, all of a sudden, this mysterious uber soldier Sephiroth has re-emerged and killed the president of this evil corporation. You haven't even seen Sephiroth yet, just heard a few scant tales of how great he was, and then you witness a literal path of destruction left by him. Who is this badass? How does Cloud know him? Just like that, we find out the story is much bigger than just stopping this evil corporation. Now there's a new player in the game whose intentions surely can't be good, and we haven't even seen him yet. Well, not so in the remake. You literally see Sephiroth an hour into the game because of course you do. This is Final Fantasy VII, and what's the thing people know most about Final Fantasy VII? Sephiroth. Let's cram in as much Sephiroth as possible because Sephiroth rules, yo. Yo, dog, I heard you like Sephiroth, so we put Sephiroth into all the parts of the story he doesn't belong in. Walking around the city? Here's Sephiroth. Leaving Midgar? How about another scoop of Sephiroth? You know what? Maybe we should give this story a little more space from Sephiroth. Or maybe we put Sephiroth in space. Oh. So anyway, instead of this great scene finding President Shinra dead with a sword sticking out of his back, Cloud and co. stumble upon him dangling from the edge of the building. For some reason they save him, even though he's literally the head of the evil company they're fighting, even though President Shinra literally dropped a huge chunk of the city onto the slums, killing God knows how many people, and even though Cloud and Tifa and Barret probably killed a crap ton of innocent people by blowing up all Shinra's reactors. But whatever. For some reason now we're above killing people. So then, surprise, President Shinra pulls a gun on Barret, but before he can pull the trigger, more Sephiroth. Yep, even though he wasn't physically present during this scene in the original game, Sephiroth shows up and runs the president through with his sword. Then, the dumb Whispers of Fate show up for some reason, and then Sephiroth kills Barret. Sephiroth kills Barret. For no reason at all, Sephiroth kills Barret. And why do I say for no reason? Because 30 seconds later, a whisper pops out of Barret's body, and then Barret is miraculously alive again. So this event happened for no good reason. It was just for the sake of shock, I guess. Kinda like every decision in Star Wars 8 and 9. Oh my god, they had the balls to kill off a major character, and one of the good guys was responsible? That's amazing! Such a bold decision could push Rey to the dark side, or...
He's on my ship. He's alive.
What? How?
He's alive. He must have been on a different transport.
Oh, no. Wait. There was another spaceship off screen we didn't see, and Chewbacca was alive the whole time.
Dum 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 dum.
So anyway, at this point in the original game, Cloud and the gang escape the Shinra building, have a crazy motorcycle highway chase, fight a big bad Shinra robot, and leave the city, setting foot on the vast overworld and essentially ending the first chapter of a bigger story. In the remake, however, Cloud and the gang escape the Shinra building, but now there's a whole bunch of whispers surrounding the building for some reason. Then we do the motorcycle chase sequence, which goes on for far too long. Big surprise there. Seriously, this portion is drawn out to almost 20 minutes, and if you mess it up, you have to start all the way back from the beginning. Have I mentioned the remake is tedious? Okay, so you get to the end of the highway, but instead of leaving Midgar behind and embarking on a new quest to hunt down and stop Sephiroth, the remake pulls this BS. Sephiroth shows up because reasons. No, because we can't end the game without having an ultra sweet battle with Sephiroth. That would be stupid. And right when we're about to fight Sephiroth, this crap happens. Imagine being someone who's heard of Final Fantasy VII but never played the original, and they decide the remake is the perfect opportunity to find out what the hype is all about. And then they play this game, and all this random shit is happening. People in cloaks floating around, some dude with long hair, a long sword, and a long jacket randomly showing up for no explainable reason. And then you're just getting to the end of the game, and you kinda have a grasp on who the major players of the story are, and then some other new dude wearing Cloud's sword just shows up. Oh, and randomly a cat wearing a crown pops in for 5 seconds and is never mentioned again. Imagine you're that new player, and you just got shotgun blasted with all these random characters and scenes, and you have to wait till part 2 comes out in 2065 before you even start to get any answers. Back to the Sephiroth fight, which isn't even happening yet because now you're crossing the barrier of whispers to go to the crossroads of destiny. And here, at the edge of the city, things start floating and gravity has no meaning. And you start flying around and doing super sweet anime acrobatics because Nomura thought the game should be even more like Kingdom Hearts. That's when you're confronted by a giant Heartless. I mean a giant Whisper. But before you even get to the giant Whisper, you have to fight these other Dayglow Whispers over a series of like 8 battles. It honestly just drags on and on. Tonally, this whole ending section of battles feels so out of place with the rest of the game. You're fighting these ethereal, otherworldly beings in a zero-gravity wasteland after an entire game somewhat grounded in a grimy city. The whole time you're fighting these endgame battles, you keep seeing glimpses of the future, including Meteor, Aerith's death, and Cloud's final showdown with Sephiroth. Once you defeat all these smaller Whispers and then the Mega Whisper, then you have to have a 10-minute showdown with Sephiroth. You know, the guy that we don't know much about or why we're even fighting him. But it's Sephiroth! Look! He's got his one wing! Everyone knows that one wing! So after this fight, Cloud ends up in space for a one-on-one battle with Sephiroth, cleverly mimicking the camera work of the original game's final fight. So Sephiroth says some cryptic stuff about defying fate and asks Cloud to join him. I really hate this JRPG mumbo-jumbo trope of a villain saying vague BS about fate.
That which lies ahead does not yet exist.
Let us defy destiny together.
Why not just say something like, "Hey Cloud, I found out that our lives are being manipulated by these supernatural beings, and I think we should team up to defeat them so that we can make our own destinies. You in? Instead, we get this crap.
7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps.
Great, some vague line that's seemingly setting up some kind of time travel Galaxy Quest BS.
Affecting a 13-second time jump to the past.
Well, why 13 seconds? That's really not enough time to do anything of any importance.
It'd be time to redeem a single mistake.
By the way, Galaxy Quest rocks, and the time travel MacGuffin of that movie works well. You know what doesn't work well? Introducing whatever this defying fate or time travel bullcrap is into a game that never had it in the first place. The story wasn't broken, Nomura, so why the hell did you try to go Kingdom Hearts fix it?
Xehanort's heart took his master's name, Ansem, and traveled to the past to give his younger self instructions. His empty body stayed in the present, took the name Xemnas, and founded Organization 13. Their goal was to prepare 13 vessels for Xehanort's heart.
So the game sorta decides to end, but not without putting in some more timeline-changing bullcrap. We cut back to the scene with Zack, who again, a new player experiencing the world of FF7 for the first time, is just gonna be confused by it. Instead of Zack getting killed off in his attempt to drag Cloud into Midgar, we see that Zack somehow survived, cementing the fact that the remake is massively changing the original game's story. In fact, it looks like Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse all survived the attack on the plate, which kinda sucks because their sacrifice in Sector 7 was a huge part of Barrett's motivation and character growth. The raw emotion of Barrett realizing his whole team is dead, of him firing his gun arm in frustration, is now completely moot, because in the remake, they all survived. So now we've got 4 characters who appear to be alive when they all should be dead. There's no stakes, no weight, no consequences to anybody's actions anymore. No need to fear permanent character death, because these hooded Kingdom Hearts fucks can just swoop in and revive anyone willy-nilly. Between Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse surviving, and Sephiroth's cryptic comment on 7 seconds, I'm wondering if the game developers even have enough spine to kill off anyone anymore. And by anyone, I mean Aerith. If this remake ends with a Galaxy Quest style 7 seconds going back in time to save Aerith, I swear to f***ing God. Also, if we're seeing 2 different timelines here, and the trajectory of the remake is going to involve either correcting the timeline or forging a new timeline with these changes, then my single question is, why? Did Nomura and team really think there wasn't enough story in the original game, that they had to jam in the whispers and this whole new plot about fate and alternate timelines? Why spoil some of the game's later plot like Meteor and Aerith's death by repeatedly showing glimpses of them in the opening chapter of the story? Are we seeing these glimpses because the original plot is going to be subverted? The whole thing is just so unnecessary. A needless perversion of the original game's plot. You know what never existed in the original Final Fantasy VII? Alternate timelines, time travel, multiple realities, and arbiters of fate. That's just a bunch of made-up Nomura bullshit. Also, saying, well, the original game's still there, just go play that, is a weak-ass argument, especially when you have other modern remakes that didn't completely shit on their source material. Ultimately though, this game isn't for me. I'm glad other people seem to like it, even think it's better than the original. And hey, I don't want you to think the original Final Fantasy VII is the perfect game. It's not even the perfect Final Fantasy. The original Final Fantasy VII is a dated game that is not without its issues, but it's legitimately fun to play. It's never tedious, like, say, this. Or like fighting these guys. Or having to slash at an endless amount of these guys. Even with all the original game's garbled translation errors, the story is at least comprehensible. Unlike...
Every time the whispers touch me, I lose something, a part of myself. Follow them, the yellow flowers.
Final Fantasy VII Remake is a gorgeous looking game with fun combat, great music, pitch-perfect voice acting, etc. But it ultimately evades perfection by messing up in 2 critical areas, being a 25-hour game inside a bloated 35-hour shell, and by needlessly tampering with the story to appeal to the 15 Kingdom Hearts fans left in the world.
Say, fellas, did somebody mention the door to darkness?
One final point I'd like to mention is that for years, Square-Enix swore they wouldn't remake Final Fantasy VII until they released a modern FF that was even better. And then we got Final Fantasies 13 and 15. Whoops. I guess after those two dumpster fires, Square-Enix realized their days of making acclaimed video games were long behind them, and that they may as well cash in on remakes while there was still a demand. Hey, if I have any faint praise for Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's that it was head and shoulders better than FF13 and 15. So, that's good.